You read that right. This story is, in fact, about a woman who gave birth to rabbits. Buckle up because you're in for a ride through time as we visit early 18th century England and see how a woman convinced half of England that she was firing rabbits out of her vagina. It's a bright and beautiful spring day in April. Last night's rainfall made a soupy haze descend upon the plains on this cool, crisp morning. An illiterate peasant woman toils in the fields outside her small town of Godalming in Surrey County, England, 1726. It might sound quaint from a distance, but let's get one thing straight. If you weren't born into nobility back then, you were fucked. That's not an exaggeration either. You didn't have rights, you didn't have options for labor, and you sure as shit couldn't collect unemployment or welfare. Hell, you might not even live anywhere close to a store. There's a very good chance that you might be born in a house so far away from society that you will only see maybe 10 people in your whole life. Daily life back then was basically like playing a really boring survival game. Wake up at the crack of dawn, walk 2 hours to work yourself into an early grave for someone who was born wealthier than you, then drag your exhausted ass home after like 12 hours of back-breaking labor to spend 5 minutes eating supper with your family. Rinse and repeat. You know how everyone today thinks they have some kind of higher purpose or that we're all unique and interesting? Yeah, back then no one had the time or energy to care about any of that shit. They were too busy trying to stay alive or have any big lifelong goals besides putting food on the table and giving birth to as many children as you could so that you could put them to work and finally take a goddamn break before your heart gives out at the ripe old age of 30. Mary Toft was one of these women. Mary, a mother of three, had been recovering from a recent miscarriage, but work never takes a break, and Mary's whole life was work. Suddenly, a rabbit jumped out of nowhere and scared the fuck out of Mary. She didn't really think anything of it at the time, ever since that moment, though. Something happened to Mary. She started to change. She wanted to eat nothing but rabbits. It was all that was on her mind. Rabbit stew, rabbit fricassee, roast rabbit, fried rabbit. Lucky for her, rabbits were everywhere in that part of the country. They were kind of like a nuisance, especially in little sparse towns like Godalming. So Mary chowed down on rabbit for the next few weeks until she started to feel something kicking inside her, like as if she was pregnant. But how? After a recent miscarriage, she didn't have anything to kick, but she could feel something in there. So a few weeks go by and she starts to feel like more of a presence going on in her stomach or, abdominal area. And she starts showing signs of pregnancy, but how could she be pregnant? It's very strange. And so finally in September, she actually started going into labor, which defies all explanation because she wasn't pregnant, but she wasn't. So as you can suspect by the title of this video, she gave birth to her first, you guessed it, rabbit. But if you're expecting like some cute little hairless fella that looks kind of like a weird raisin, then you're barking up the wrong birth canal, friend. It came out in pieces, and it had fur and fully formed eyes. So what the fuck was happening here? Now, you may be wondering what the reaction of the family was upon witnessing this event. I'd like to think that it was something along the lines of mortal fucking terror and the belief that she was giving birth to the goddamn Antichrist or that she had a portal to hell in her ham wallet, but you'd be wrong. Their reaction was more like, huh, that's weird. They weren't screaming or praying or dragging Mary out to the nearest church to perform an exorcism on her. They just kind of looked at the pile of weird animal flesh that came out of Mary and scratched their heads and decided to scoop the animal guts off the floor and seal them in pickle jars for the time being. Yeah, that's right, pickle jars. They weren't scholars, so for all they knew, this kind of thing happened all the time. Remember, this was 1726. So there was a damn near infinitesimally high chance that you didn't know anything about fucking anything, except literally working until you fucking die. So Mary's mother-in-law, Anne, rushed out to grab the town doctor, John Howard. John Howard, the town doctor, was pretty much just the guy who could take your pulse, knew a thing or two about how to use a hacksaw, and could actually read and write, which was pretty rare, actually. He wanted to examine Mary for any possible infection, damage to the uterus, or portal of eldritch horrors waiting to be released on an innocent world. But the first thing the doctor saw when he entered the house, albeit by pure coincidence, of course, when he entered the house, was Mary in mid-labor with her ninth rabbit. This rabbit's siblings were already in pickle jars and put in the pantry. Now that I think about it, this whole thing's really weird, and it's only going to get weirder, but I have to wonder something, right? Why the fuck did they keep the rabbits in jars? Actually, why'd they keep them at all? Why didn't they just bury them in the ground and never speak of it again? But anyway, over the next month, Dr. Howard helped deliver Mary's ninth rabbit, then 10th, 11th, 12th, all the while just flabbergasted at the entire idea of it all. Up until now, a typical day for Dr. Howard was maybe amputating a gangrenous toe here or sticking a few leeches there, but nothing could prepare him for a woman who was literally giving birth to rabbits. Sure, some of them looked like they were old enough to apply for Medicare, but who was he to question the unseen hands that work the magic of a woman's womb? I mean, what are rabbits supposed to look like when actual human women give birth to them? Did they cover that in med school? You bet. Yeah, actually, they did cover that in med school. I shit you not. Listen, since medicine in the 18th century was almost about as much of an exact science as witchcraft, doctors actually had a term for this kind of thing. Doctors called this medical phenomenon a suitorkin. It was a commonly held belief by the medical field at that time that maternal impressions could affect the birth of your child. These suitorkins are babies that are shaped in the womb by very strong thoughts of the mother. It was literally just, well, she thought about rabbits, so she had a rabbit. Yep, that's what we're going with. Fucking science. In fact, the world-famous elephant man, Joseph Merrick, openly stated that it was his mother who was startled by an elephant when she was pregnant with him that caused him to look like, well, like how he does. I never really thought he looked like an elephant, to be honest with you. I mean, here's a picture of him, okay? And here's a picture of an elephant. Tell me this and this look alike, because I'm not seeing it. I don't know. I maybe they just couldn't think of a better word to call him. I don't know, man, but like, I guess it's maybe the head, but I don't know. I never really thought that the elephant man looked like an elephant. I would expect like an elephant man to look like, this. But anyway, I digress. I'm sorry. In the coming weeks, Mary became a person of interest in her little village. The whole thing was just so fucking weird that it was all anyone could think about talking about. It was sort of like the weird freak show tabloid news story of the month, which, yeah, even in early 18th century England, they had gossip and they had this. It's the same shit. We have the Enquirer and we have the Daily Sun. Back then, they had Mary giving birth to rabbits. This is just human fucking nature, man. So the whole thing was just so fucking weird that it was all anyone could talk about. She was the weird tabloid news story of the month. Extra, local mom gives birth to a litter of bunnies. Experts are baffled. Is this a sign of good fortune or a dire warning of treacherous times to come? She was getting famous. She was just spitting out bunnies left and right like one of those machines at the batting cages. One day, 9 fucking bunnies were pulled out of her. In one day! She was then moved to Guildford for further studying, where she could be closer to Dr. Howard. By the end of it all, some say Dr. Howard helped deliver 17 bunnies. So for those of you keeping track out there, that means Mary gave birth to 26 bunnies at this current point in the story, okay? So right now we're at 26 bunnies. I don't know, man. All of them were dead, and all of them had fur. Yeah. Still, Dr. Howard was completely convinced, so he wrote to his friends and colleagues about what he's been up to for the past month. Well, they told 2 friends, and then they told 2 friends, and then they told 2 friends, and so on, and so on, until King George the First heard about it and was so intrigued that he sent 2 of his royal physicians to go check this shit out. Nathaniel St. Andre and Samuel Molyneux. So now you've got Dr. Howard, Nathaniel, and Samuel, 3 grown-ass men who apparently were all smart enough to somehow become doctors, who really couldn't figure out how these rabbits kept coming out of Mary. They were doctors, yeah, but they sure as hell weren't detectives. Holy fucking shit, man. This was literally during the Enlightenment. Nope, they just yanked a few more bunnies out of Mary like magicians for Caligula's birthday party, and Nathaniel was convinced. I mean, not just convinced, but actually supercharged about the whole thing. If you thought Dr. Howard was hyped for writing to his friends in the medical field, Nathaniel made him look like an absolute pile of poser puke by writing a whole book about it. I shit you not. Our boy, Nathaniel St. Andre, literally wrote a book about pulling rabbits out of a woman's birth canal from the perspective of a trained medical professional. And I'm, of course, going to share an excerpt from this book right now. A short narrative of an extraordinary delivery of rabbits, with an E. A doctor wrote this. I opened 3 or 4 of the hearts and found in every one of them the foramen ovale and the ductus arteriosus fully open, and 2 trunks of the decended cava united at the right auricle of the heart, agreeable to that structure which is peculiar to natural rabbits and foam few other animals. The fleff of these creatures, particularly of that which I extracted, had the smell of rabbits just killed, and the substance of their bones were, in all respects, like the bones of fetus rabbits. I can't pronounce this word. Fetus rabbits. In several of them were the epiphyses were separated from the bones themselves. I feel like a fucking Sylvester the Cat reading this. All the heads which I examined had their complete number of teeth, 4 cut before, and 10 grinders on each side, but they appeared not in the least warm nor stained, as the teeth of other rabbits are by mastication. The nails of the paws were most of them exceedingly sharp. The skins were all produced, being dressed in alum. They were of several colors, and as to their fur, which was considerably long, and in one particularly, which was the 5th rabbit, that part which covered the head was curled. The rabbit which I extracted weighed 21 ounces, avoirdupois? I don't know what that word means. Making an allowance for one of the paws not yet come away, and part of the viscera that were left. From all these configurations, I was fully convinced that that the external appearance of these animals was exactly like such creatures, and as must inevitably undergo the changes. So the rabbits kept on coming, and no one knew what was going on. By now, Mary made national headlines because Nathaniel St. Andre just would not stop going on about her. Samuel Molyneux, the other royally appointed representative who was sent with Nathaniel, was like, listen, man, I'm telling you, there's something about this that just isn't making a whole lot of sense. And Nathaniel was like, nah, bro, it's totally real, come on. And Molyneux was like, listen, rabbits aren't supposed to be born with dirt under the claws, fur, or partially decayed. Haven't you ever seen a baby rabbit before? And Nathaniel was like, huh, you know what? Maybe you're onto something. And Molyneux perked up and was like, really? And Nathaniel was like, of course she's really giving birth to rabbits. We just watched it happen. Are you stupid or something? And that's when I think Molyneux just walked outside, took a deep breath, and counted to 10, and then just beat his head against the wall for like a few minutes. I need to take a minute, an aside, to really make you think about this. Some of these rabbits were weeks old, but some of them had also shown signs of decomposing. So I want you, the audience, to really sit there and think about not only how fucking unsanitary that was, but imagine the smell inside that room, which must have been packed with midwives and doctors all watching this happen. Just let that sink in, you know, if you don't mind going on a little sensory dive right now. But with that image in mind, let me continue. So now Mary was being moved to London to be studied. Mary was in the big leagues now. So what was next? Would she become a living saint? The woman who could produce rabbits? Was she going to become world famous? Late night talk show spot? Movie deal? Crypto? The sky was the limit as far as the Toft family was concerned, just as long as she kept firing out those rabbits. Even the Prince of Wales was convinced. But as we all know, the charade couldn't go on forever. Finally, the physician Cyriacus Ahlers got the bright idea to actually sit there and hide and watch who entered and left Mary's room. I know, no one thought about doing this, and for more than half of England, they were convinced this woman was really giving birth to rabbits, and no one thought for even a fucking minute to do this. So guess what happened? I know, right? Shockingly, of course they were caught trying to sneak rabbits into her room. And guess what else happened? She stopped giving birth to rabbits. That's some horrible timing, isn't it? Man, what a coincidence.
No shit.
So that was when the royally appointed physicians started to finally wake up and smell the rabbit pellets. Literally, rabbits that Mary previously delivered were autopsied and their poop pellets contained grass. And grass doesn't grow inside a woman's womb, at least not the last time I checked. But then again, neither do rabbits, so they weren't really sure what to use as a frame of reference, you know? Anyway, after days of questioning and interrogation upon seeing the facade start to crack, royal medical staff Richard Manningham and James Douglas told Mary that she had a choice: confess to faking the pregnancies or let the medical staff do what has only been described as a brutal and invasive surgery to examine her reproductive organs. Listen, I don't need to tell you what medicine was like in 1726, let alone surgery. Surgery didn't mean back then what it means today. You didn't have antiseptic or even painkillers, so there was a very good chance they were literally considered just straight killing her and performing an autopsy on her reproductive organs to see if they were part animal. Even if she somehow lived through the procedure, the risk of infection or permanent damage was too great. So she folded right there on the spot. That was it. No more rabbits. Mary confessed that it was all just a huge scam and that her mother-in-law and her husband were secretly putting the rabbits in her the whole time, and this was all just a huge grift so they could try to get some attention and maybe earn a living as a sideshow or something. She wasn't part woodland creature, and she wasn't secretly meeting the Easter Bunny at the sleazy motel on the edge of the town on Thursdays. All she did was stick with the story until she couldn't keep up the bit anymore. Simple as that. That's right, an illiterate 25-year-old peasant mother of 3 and her family fooled half of England, most of the medical world, and even the royal family. Obviously, we can look back on history with a story like this with a sense of smug satisfaction now that we live in more civilized times, but you know, we're really not that much better. Sure, we'd be a lot quicker to call bullshit on something like a woman giving birth to rabbits if it happened today, but you have to stop and ask yourself how often a new conspiracy theory shows up, or how often your well-meaning aunt forwards you an email about how the cell phone towers are being controlled by the deep state or something. You need to realize that something is only really true if enough people believe it, and people will believe in absolutely anything if there's enough evidence behind it. Doctors literally pulled rabbits out of Mary, so that was all the proof they needed. For Howard and St. Andre, Mary really was giving birth to rabbits because they were literally there for the births. So in their world, it was all real. Just like how today more and more people are getting fooled by deep fake AI videos and spreading them around so that once enough people believe in the lie, it becomes their new reality. We're just as gullible and stupid as we ever were. Don't look so smug. So what happened to Mary and her conspirators? Well, Mary was officially charged with being a notorious and vile cheat. That's what they said. That was the official record. And spent 4 months in prison, but was released without a trial because the justice system just couldn't figure out what to really hold her on. There wasn't a specific law about hiding rabbits in your vagina and faking births to convince medical personnel that you're a vessel for interspecies procreation. After that, Mary and her family pretty much disappeared from the public and spent the rest of their days just living a normal life. Despite all the horrific infections and injuries she sustained from hiding decaying rabbits inside her over the past few months, she still lived to the ripe old age of 60 and had 12 children in total. So how about Nathaniel St. Andre? He had a much worse outcome. Dr. Nathaniel St. Andre, who was fully convinced that the births were real, never recovered his reputation after this. Everyone just saw him as that gullible dumbass who wrote that stupid book with the goofy spelling about getting flummoxed by a woman who put rabbits in her vagina until he died a penniless wretch at age 99. At least he lived a long life, but maybe that was some kind of karmic punishment for how easily he was fooled.
You stupid!
In fact, Mary ended up having a rippling effect on the world at large with her big scam because it was such a massive failure on behalf of the medical science, and it started to get people to really rethink what they knew about medicine. The higher-ups in the social food chain were kind of the ones to suffer the most backlash for it. It's like the higher up you were, the more of an imbecile you looked like when the entire thing turned out to be bullshit. I don't know how Mary really felt about this whole thing because the records don't really have her in too many interviews. But I'd personally like to think that it made her happy to know that someone as small as her was able to make the entire world point and laugh at the King of England for believing in such nonsense. Yeah, Mary was publicly humiliated for the hoax, and she was kind of a punchline for a little while. But she would fade back into obscurity and live peacefully for the rest of her years, like a good, like 30 good years. But the doctors and royalty, they were the ones who had their reputations tarnished, and that shit stuck with them forever. Like they try to just kind of forget about it, but people remember. Like they're always going to have that on them. So I like to really think that Mary ended up kind of winning in the end. Mary's story should be a cautionary tale for how far someone will go for attention, but also the lengths people will go to suspend their disbelief in something so bizarre that it defies all reality.